Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the owner of Oakland's Eisner Award-winning Cape and Cowl Comics and an Eisner Award judge from 2025. It's Eitan Manhoff. Thanks for coming on, Eitan.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here.
I realize I described it as the Eisner Award-winning Cape and Cowl Comics. It is a comic shop. I feel like that should be an important descriptor that for some reason I completely did not have in there, but Cape and Cowl Comics isn't open yet today, so it might be a quiet morning for you so far, but how's the day treating you, Eitan?
Oh, so far so good. Up early with the dogs, then took the kids, or one of the kids off to a play date, and then back here to talk to you. So what could be bad?
You know, this is something I've never really thought about. I mean, besides when I actually worked in a comic shop, but your shop opens at 11 every day?
Yep, every day.
What time do you actually go in when you're working?
It kind of depends on the day of the week. You know, I let my staff and my customers know I'm a man of leisure. You know, I come and go as I see fit, or really as my kids and pets see fit. But on, Tuesday, I try to be there the whole day, 11 to 7. On Wednesday, I get there at 10 and stay till 7. And then the other days are a little more loosey-goosey. I'll usually start my day working at home and then head in and then get out of there on the earlier side to come and do, kid stuff, home stuff.
Do you go in every day?
I go in Monday through Friday.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I was just thinking about it just because I think that how many staff members do you have right now?
9.
So, you don't need to work the floor like some of the small, one-man shops necessarily need to. I don't know. I'm interested in how much your role has shifted, because I imagine early on with Cape and Cowl, you were probably a man with many hats. You were doing kind of everything. And these days, I don't know, are you able to be more behind the scenes because of the staff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do. It's set up now that I never have to be there. I don't have to be we need basically 3 people to cover our floor because of the shape of the store. It's like a C shape almost. So we really need 2 people in front where most of the action is and 1 person in back. And so there's always at least 3 people staffed every day. And that's very different from when I started, when it was just me 7 days a week, 10 hours a day.
Whew.
And that was built into my business plan that I actually wrote down and showed to people, and people said, yeah, do this. Was 7 days a week, 10 hours a day for the first year. And I made it about 2 months, and then I hired somebody.
Was the idea that keeping staff costs down would make it more sustainable?
Basically, the main goal getting started was to last a year.
Yeah.
So really trying not to spend much money beyond anything that would get people in the door.
That makes sense. You said you go in on Wednesdays from 10 to 7. So that seems like a really big focus day, which makes sense. Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. Do you have a sense as to how things are going on? The most recent Wednesday was a really big week of releases. There was Imperial #1. There was some other big Marvel launches. There was a couple Absolute issues. There was a conclusion to Moon is Following Us. Obviously, there's probably other books that were big, depending on your opinion, to kind of what appeals to you. But do you have a sense each week as to what's working and what isn't? Or is that level of kind of viewpoint not something you really have on a day-to-day basis now?
No, absolutely I do. Yeah, I can gauge the good weeks versus the bad. I mean, fortunately, they're mostly good weeks right now. There's something hitting every single week, and usually there's multiple things hitting every week. And I look at a sales report every day. I'm always curious to see what we sold the most of, what we sold out of, that kind of thing. I am working the floor on Wednesday, but I'm not the lead cashier or anything. I'm usually that guy in the back half of the store, and then come up when I, hear particular voices or to just see what's going on. But I definitely have my finger on the pulse of the Wednesday cycle and new releases.
It's funny, my barometer for how it's a very soft barometer because it's entirely dependent on what I'm reading, but I do my Tuesday column, The Pull, where I write about the things that I'll be buying or recommending or the curiosities and everything. And it is kind of interesting that while it kind of seems like the direct market has been ascendant for, let's say, the I don't know. I don't want to say maybe about the last year, or maybe a little bit less. It really kicked off into overdrive in October. I've kind of seen my own buys ascending too, which makes sense. You would think that there'd be a correlation to it. But I did want to talk about your shop in general, the weird world of the direct market right now, and your experiences as an Eisner judge. I can talk about how my own buys are increasing, but that's kind of meaningless. I'm just one person in Alaska. How has the year been so far for your shop?
Year's been really good. We're up 10%, almost exactly 10% over this same stretch of time from 2024. And lots of transaction numbers are higher. The enthusiasm seems higher. Everything feels really good, sales wise, store wise, in this first half of the year.
I mean, I think one thing that strikes me as an outsider is that beyond the product, beyond the conversation about the product, it seems like you all are very good at cultivating the community aspect. Like you were just at BallerCon. Was that something you actually put on? It's an event for an independent baseball league team called the Oakland Ballers.
That's right.
Was that something you put on, or was that something you just participated in?
No, we put that on. Yeah, we put on, I guess you might call it like a micro con.
Yeah.
Right before a game. It was just outside the park and in a little park behind right field. And we had 14 or 15 tables, different artists, creators, vendors. The ballers themselves were out there selling BallerCon shirts. We were giving away free comics. It was actually awesome.
Yeah.
It was super cool. And really going in, we had no idea if anybody would come to something like this. You know, it was 2 hours. It only lasted for 2 hours right before, like you said, an independent baseball team game.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out we were packed for 2 hours. People loved it.
That's awesome. Do you think it exposed you to some people that maybe previously hadn't been to Cape and Cowl?
Hopefully. Yeah, I think so. We lucked out a little bit. On the next block down was a farmer's market.
Oh.
And so, and you could see us from the end. There was like a stage there. We had live music playing, which we weren't even planning for, but it was sweet.
Yeah.
And people just kind of wandered to us from there. So yeah, hopefully those people are like, whoa, there's a comic store, there's a baseball team. Like, look at all this cool stuff happening in West Oakland.
I love that stuff. I'm totally the type of person who, when I'm at one event and if I see another event from there, I will absolutely go to that one. It is kind of funny, though. That's an interesting intersection of, I don't want to say fandoms, interesting intersection of interests. You have a farmer's market, baseball, and comic shop all in the same area. You probably get at least some people who are not into comics going there, which is pretty, I don't know, great for you.
Yeah, it was very cool. We're totally being nosy about what was in people's bags from the farmer's market. Pitching them on coming into the game with us. It was a very cool little moment where, the intersection was cool. The crossover was cool. It was a great time.
That's awesome. Well, I think from the outside, it seems like one of the big stories of basically the past year that's been kind of fueling stuff is, like I said, it started in October, and a lot of that reason was Absolute. Absolute DC seems like it kind of put afterburners on what was already trending upwards in the direct market. But what have you seen that has been kind of driving your rise? Because it often seems like there's this like lagging view as to like how the direct market is doing, where people are like, oh, you see Diamond, they're in bankruptcy. You see all these conversations about how like comics are dying, all this stuff like that. And yet every comic shop I'm talking to is doing really well. What is driving things for you right now?
Well, we have become a single issue new comics centric store, where we used to be a little more balanced. The balance is certainly tipped towards the new comics, and just seeing a lot of enthusiasm. There's just people are pumped on the books that are coming out, and they're trying new things because they're in the shop to grab their Absolute Batman or their Jim Hush 2. Or whatever it might be. There's people coming into the shop because they're excited. Before October of last year, I think we were experiencing a little bit of apathy, a little bit of routine buying. Things were it's just not as exciting. We've been a big X-Men store since the Krakoa Hickman launch, and then that ended, and people, no shade to the X books that are coming out right now, but people's attitude and enthusiasm changed. Some people did take it as a point where like, okay, I read this era, I'm on to other things, and the other people were just kind of like, well, I'm an X-Men person. I'll just keep getting these X-Men, and I think there was just a little too much of that, a little too much of, well, I come on Wednesday because that's what I do. And maybe I won't even come on Wednesday. Maybe I'll come on Friday. And oh, those ones are sold out. Oh, well, and now people are in, we have people waiting for us to open on Wednesday. And we have people in the shop all day long until we're like, hey, we're ready to go. Like, it's been a long day. So yeah, I think enthusiasm over new releases is really what's driving things for us.
One thing that I've talked about on the podcast particularly with Steve Anderson, who's been kind of pitching this line for a while, is that he thinks that the single issue world has shifted from collector driven to content driven. And I think that that's a really important part of the equation, even though I hate the word content. The thing that I find interesting is like, I've seen the same thing as you. It's like, I go to my comic shop at noon on Wednesdays when they open up, and there's always like 8 to 10 people waiting, and there hadn't been before. And the other thing too is like getting people to come regularly and getting them to come and be excited about what they're reading. It seems like having those kind of headliners, the Hush 2s, the Absolutes, the Energons, the Ultimates, all those things like that, Aliens versus Avengers, if you're me, will inspire you to try other things just because you're excited about it. Is that something you've seen in your shop?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's really nice when a creator who is hitting in like the Marvel or DC sphere puts out something else. Like Assorted Crisis Events is crushing at our shop because we got a ton of people reading Ultimates and feeling like that's one of the best books that Marvel's putting out. And so we can be like, hey, check this out. This writer is doing something else entirely. It's incredible. You should really try it. If you dig Ultimates, I know there's no capes or rocket boots or whatever, but you're going to love this book. To Steve's point, we are selling to readers way more than collectors, which when we were booming in 2022, is like the kind of tail end of the big boom. That was super collector driven, majorly collector driven, which, somebody like myself or a shop like ours, like we'll cater to that and we'll have fun with it, but much rather be selling people stories, and creators and things that they're going to build off of and want to read more from.
Does that feel more sustainable than the other version?
100%.
Yeah.
100,000,000%. The collector's a scary creature, especially the ones who come in hot and heavy because they burn out.
Yeah, they're hot till they're cold.
Yeah. And you can see it coming a mile away. Somebody comes in and they're just buying everything in sight and having a great time, and just like really enjoying the hobby. But all of a sudden, you do the math and like, wow, that guy spent $12,000 this month. Like, I get that he's 30 and he's single and maybe has a pretty decent job, but at some point he's going to look at those receipts and and then the problem is he looks at those receipts and you've got half of a short box of stuff he ordered sitting there.
Yeah.
And more coming in. And you're like, oh, but that's my $12,000 a month guy. Like, it's fine. I can wait another month. I can let this $700 more stuff come in and I'll sit on it. He'll be here. And then he's not there. But readers want to read that next issue. Readers don't sit and let a box build for 4 or 5 months.
I had something that used to happen a lot happen to me recently, and it was delightful. And I'm kind of curious if you see this in your shop more lately because of it. I was having a conversation with somebody who's another comic fan. I have a comic book garage sale in the summer quite often, and he will come to it and just like hang out for hours and talk about comics. But we started talking and we just walked around the racks at my shop, Bosco's, and just were pointing at comics we loved and we're like, have you read this? This is amazing. Have you read this? This is amazing. I haven't done that in like 3 years, Eitan. And that's why I love comic shops. I love that camaraderie. I love that connection. And it was, I don't know, it kind of felt like a moment in a weird way where it was like, is this back? Is this back in a real way? Are you seeing that at all?
Yeah, I mean that's the best feeling in the world for somebody in my position or a store's position. I think is I might be out on the racks or on the floor talking to people about books, pitching people books, and then somebody else chimes in,
Yeah.
and then they start having their own conversation, and I just like quietly back away and hope nobody notices, and then they're chatting for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, about what they're reading and suggesting stuff to each other. It's incredible. And just this morning or just Wednesday morning, the two first guys to the door are walking the stands and they're grabbing it was Marvel Knights, the One World,
The World to Come.
The World to Come. And they're both really pretty excited about it. Maybe the controversy, whatever it is. But we only had like one cover on the stands and one of the guy had picked it up and the other guy was asking for it at the counter. And the guy who had picked it up heard and comes over and he's like, hey, man, I think I got the last one. Why don't you take it? And then they're chatting about why they're excited about the book and what else they're grabbing for the week. And I was like, man, we did it. We did it, guys.
We're back.
We
back.
did it, comics.
This is great. Yeah, I love that. I love that type of stuff. But, you said that you've shifted from being pretty even between graphic novels and single issues to being more of a single issue shop. And that requires adjustments, I imagine. That's like a, different focus in terms of like how you're ordering, probably different focus on how you're pitching stuff. Has that required real adjustments on your end, or is it just kind of following the customer's leads?
No, I think it has required adjustments. I think we're still making them. So for years, up until maybe, I guess, up until the pandemic. So maybe it's only the first 5 years we were open and the last 5 years have been a shift. I guess my mind is still stuck in that time where it was really split. But it is we used to be 40% new comics in a year and 40% graphic novels and then 20% other stuff. And when I was looking at the numbers just this morning, the last 2 years, or last year, 2024, and the first half of 2025, we are 48% of our total sales are new comics and 32% are graphic novels. It's weird. You're still hitting that 80% and still selling 20% other stuff, which the numbers just trip me out. There's like too many coincidences. And that 48-32 split was exactly the same for 2024 to the first, 5 months of this year, which is so weird. But, there's logistical challenges to this. We don't have a ton of space in our store. We don't have a lot of storage. And when you're selling mostly new comics, you have a lot of overstock or unsold. We can have a massively successful week where we sell 85% of the books that we order, 90% of the books that we order that week. And that 10% is still half a short box of comics or 3/4 a short box of comics. And that has to go somewhere. And after that first week, you might sell down a few inches of that box, maybe in the next week, maybe if you're lucky, the books in that box have a full month lifespan before they're just a box filler, that hopefully people are ordering online or asking for, or whatever it is, one at a time. But that, say you're left with half a short box, it has to go somewhere, and I have a back room that's, I don't know, maybe 20 by 10 or something. That's probably pretty generous. And it is stuffed.
Oh, I bet.
It is stuffed. There's no room. It doubles as our break room, locker room, which is embarrassing. But it's all we have. And there's barely room for a chair and a folding table and a staff member to eat lunch. And then when a new shipment comes in, and you've got your lunar boxes and penguin boxes and everything stacked up in there, it's just like, ooh, I'm lucky that nobody who works for me has claustrophobia, because it'd probably be an HR situation at that point. We need to hit the release valve on that at some point. We got to have an overstock sale or something. We used to drag all these boxes to cons and sell the overstock for $1 a piece or something, but that I'm just getting too old for that to drag, 50 long boxes of unbagged modern comics. It's like really hard on the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll probably find a way to do it in store. So I think, ordering is you order what you think you can sell, and I tend to be somebody who orders with the future in mind. I don't want to have a lot of unsold books around, but I also am not trying to sell out by Thursday of almost anything, unless I think it's just the stupidest, unnecessary thing. But I tend not to think that about comics. I'm a pretty positive person when it comes to comics. So I guess it's more logistically challenging than anything else.
I think it's funny. I did this piece, I think 2 years ago, where I talked to readers about kind of like their own single issue reading habits. And one of the things that came up a lot was how big of a determinant space was for how much that they buy or how they shift their habits and stuff like that. And it's interesting to think about that happening on a macro scale with comic shops, but it makes sense. I mean, you talk about having, 3/4 of a long box every week that you might sell down a little bit. You multiply that by 52 weeks. It's a lot of books.
It's a lot of books.
It's a lot of books.
Yeah. No, I hear the same thing from customers all the time. Like space is a crazy concern when you're a collector and when you live in an area that's not known for having space in the home. We're not in Montana. Our customers are not living in 4-bedroom houses. They have short boxes in their living room. We sell so many of the graphic short boxes, the ones with that Marvel makes with the pretty pictures printed on them, because people, their boxes are out.
Yeah. They want them to be presentable.
That's right.
Somebody needs to make like a high-end long box or something like that looks like actual furniture or something like that.
That's such a good idea. Like wood grain or
something.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, do you like this new ottoman I have? It contains my comic books.
That's brilliant. Hey, David, that's brilliant. We should talk about this.
Let's talk about this off the... Yeah. And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Love sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and action? Then 2000 AD is the greatest comic you're not reading. 2000 AD has a whole universe of characters from Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog through to Rogue Trooper, Zenith, Shakara, and many more. In every weekly issue, you get 5 action-packed stories from incredible creators including Garth Ennis, Rob Williams, Alex DeCampi, and Dan Abnett. Get a print subscription and it'll arrive at your door every week, and your first issue is free. Or subscribe digitally, get free back issues, and download DRM free copies of each issue for just $9 a month. That's 128 pages of incredible comics every month for less than $10. And all subscribers get amazing offers like money off vouchers and exclusive products. Head to 2000AD.com and click on subscribe now, or download the 2000AD app and start reading today. And now, back to the show. You talked about how you have that 48-32 split, where it's 48% new comics versus 32% graphic novels. I have 2 questions about that. One, is that because new comics went up and graphic novels stayed the same, or is it kind of a combination of both? And then the second question is you said it really started last year and that it's been surprisingly consistent with the 48-32, but do you have a sense as kind of was there a moment that triggered that, which started sending you down that path in your mind?
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I have been thinking about it quite a bit and trying to think of the reasons why. And this probably tells you what kind of business person I am. I never consider the price. Never once did I think oh yeah, the prices are changing, right? Comic prices are going up. Graphic novel prices are staying the same. That's super interesting and could account for some of that. I was thinking a little bit more about not just what's available. And, I think I talked about this once before, and it was about we don't have those hits, right? We don't have the big trade that's dropping that we're selling, 80 copies of in the release week or something like that. But honestly, those are so rare, you can't even depend on those. So I think part of it is that maybe as a store matures, what they recommend changes.
Sure.
And therefore the velocity of certain books slows down, and as you try and recommend maybe more unique or more obscure or or different things, it might actually affect your sales. So like, for example, the first 5 years we were open or whatever, Saga Volume 1, right? Just like flew off the shelf. That's the gateway drug to comics. You put it in anybody's hands, and they're off and running. And I know, like, personally, when I'm on the floor and I'm talking to people, that's not where I'm going a lot of the time, unless I get somebody who's just like, I've never read comics and I can't tell you what I want to read or what I like or anything. Then I'm like, okay, great. Here's Saga. It's the ultimate crowd pleaser. So check this out. But if it's somebody else who's looking for sci-fi and humor or whatever, I'm probably not going to Saga first. And maybe that's just because I am less excited about selling Saga as I once was, and not because I don't love it. I do love it. And I read it. It's top of pile for me every time the issue comes out. But I think just as like a professional who's open to challenges and like diversifying, like maybe I'm reaching for different books and maybe they're not as easy of sells, and maybe I'm not as good at pitching Little Bird as I am at pitching Saga, right? Because you can't pitch Bird. You just have to be like, look at it. I can't tell you what the hell's going on in there. I don't know. Just look at the art. It's cool. You'll like it. That's my number one pitch is it's cool. You'll like it. And it works.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it is interesting because one thing I've found with the people in my life who become interested in comics but aren't, I find that a lot of people who haven't read comics before aren't interested in like the endless runs. Like that's one of the tricky things about Saga is like, I love Saga, but that comic isn't going to end until like 2032 or something like that. And so you're promising somebody a satisfying but incomplete story. And a lot of people in my life, when I try to pitch them, they're like, give me a complete story. I imagine a lot of your recommendations shift based off of who you're talking to and what they're saying in the process of engaging with them.
Absolutely. It has to, you have to be a listener first, and you have to ask questions and find out what the person is looking for, if they have anything in mind or what they like in what they've read that they like, or what kind of shows or movies or whatever it is that they like, so that you can kind of try and make some connecting tissue for them with comics. And yeah, the self-contained story is what a lot of people are looking for. I almost never get asked for like, can you give me something that's just like going and may go on forever and I'll just be on the hook to read it forever.
Do you have a 106 volume manga series I could read maybe?
Right. Well, now that you ask.
One Piece.
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting element of it too. I don't want to blame the books for what those numbers are, because I don't think it's the books. There's a million great books. Maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe because there's a million, it becomes kind of hard to hone in and keep them moving out the door. And maybe because as our business on the single issues goes up, we're so focused on that. I think it's probably a whole bunch of factors that come together to make those numbers.
I do think the number of comics part of the equation is an interesting one. And I've had a number of conversations with creators over the last like 6 months to a year where they are doing their original comics or their creator-owned comics, but it kind of feels like the volume of them and like just how top-heavy the market can feel with your absolutes and your ultimates and your energons and everything like that can actually make it incredibly difficult to stand out, despite the fact that I'd argue that like 2025 so far has been exceptionally strong on the original and the creator-owned front. What are you seeing on that side of things? Is it tough to balance for the reasons the creators have kind of laid out to me, or are you finding ways to kind of put your foot in the door and get those in front of readers?
I think we are getting those things in front of readers. I think the top-heavy element of the market is legitimate. People are coming in, most people are reading all the absolute books. Right? There's one or two of those every single week. And a lot of people are on board for these Marvel events, and they're reading Ultimate Spider-Man and Marvel, Marvel zombies are Marvel zombies, right? They buy Avengers regardless of what's going on in that book or who's writing it or whatever. So I think the people's budget from the top end of the market is is stretched pretty thin. However, I think we do a pretty good job, and it might just be the personality of our shop and who works there and our interests of keeping the creator-owned books at a respectable level in comparison, because it's, there is that top tier of Marvel DC book that sells a lot, but there's a lot of Marvel and DC books that sell in lower numbers than independent books.
Yeah.
I definitely sell more assorted crisis events than probably 10 to 15 plus Marvel books, and DC books. And we're not like blowing the doors off with assorted crisis events, as I mentioned that one again. It's just like, it's just performing really well particularly for what it is, right? It doesn't even have a narrative that continues through the issues.
It's like a anthology one shot within a structure that like sets up everything. I love that book. That book is amazing.
Yeah.
It is interesting because, well, first off, I think part of the reason why you can have like 10 to 15 Marvel books below there is so many Marvel books in particular. I mean, there's just a lot. But the other thing is, I think Deniz Camp, the writer of Assorted Crisis Events and Ultimates and Absolute Martian Manhunter. I think the thing that's really interesting about him is, God help me, I can't believe I'm making a reference to the Kirkman Manifesto in 2025, but I'm still going to do it anyways. His whole thing was always like, make your, stand out with your for hire stuff, and then take that and use that heat in your favor. And like, I'm not saying Deniz was doing something as craven as that. I think he was doing it because he wants to tell each of those stories. And like, let's be honest, Absolute Martian Manhunter in a lot of ways is as challenging as Assorted Crisis Events is. But I think he's a fascinating figure right now because of how definitely, either intentionally or unintentionally, he's played this moment. And it's great because all the books are awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for mentioning Absolute Martian Manhunter, by the way, because it's incredible. It's probably the best book on the stands, or, it's certainly in the conversation. I think that book's phenomenal and bizarre and gorgeous. And the fact that we are selling the quantity of Martian Manhunter in the year 2025 that we are, without there's no TV show, there's no movie, there's no spec, there's no anything. It's just that this Martian Manhunter book is unbelievable, and we are selling triple digits of it easily. And I have to look at the subscriber count on Absolute Martian Manhunter versus the subscriber count of like Batman, because I don't think it's that far off. And I think that's insane. And I love Martian Manhunter. I always have. And the last time he had a series, if we were selling 15 copies an issue, I would have called that a huge success.
Yeah.
Wild.
I mean, it is like a fusion of things. It's like the book is great. I think the word of mouth is like fantastic about it, because I've had people recommend it to me. And I'm like, do you think I'm not reading a Javier Rodriguez comic? I mean, it's just, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, I guess. But then also like the absolute heat, like that's the beauty of those lines, is the fact that like if one really pops, like Absolute Batman is such a big book, it starts spreading. And then you're like, oh, wow, Absolute Wonder Woman is amazing. Absolute Martian Manhunter is amazing. It becomes like its own like word of mouth machine in a very positive way. And I think that, I don't know, in a weird way, that I think has been the story for single issues for the past like year and a half, in the way that and Energon and Ultimates has delivered so much success because of that.
Yeah, that's a great point, because people get to the counter and they're picking up Absolute Batman, Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Flash, whatever. And they're like, holy shit, if you checked out Absolute Martian Manhunter, I think it's the best one. And people are like, whoa, how could you say that? Because Absolute Wonder Woman's like the best thing ever. So what do you mean it's the best one? And they like have to try it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. The quality of book A is really helping the sales on book B, and a number of different, you could point to a lot of different examples of how that's working.
I don't want to go into this, but quick aside, I rep very hard for Absolute Green Lantern. That was the book that surprised me the most for the line. I think that book is great. But I do want to ask, this is going to transition into the diamond subject, because maybe this is part of it, but we've talked about a lot of positive things. There's not a lot of negative things to necessarily talk about, but have there been any surprising challenges or any things that you faced this year that maybe people have been sleeping on the, I don't want to say negative side, but just the challenges side of things?
Yeah, and I think for years, I would hear some of the old school shops in particular kind of complain about the splintering of distribution and all the extra work that it creates. And I was very like rose-colored glasses, like, what do you mean? We're getting the same number of comics. Like we're unpacking the same number of boxes and what's the difference? It's just coming from two different places. And maybe it's just as our store has grown or whatever, but I've come around. Like we are doing 3 times the work to process the same number of comics. It's a lot of little stuff added together. I create a particular spreadsheet that we use to check in the books from the different distributors. Well, I got to create that spreadsheet 3 times, and when creating it from Penguin is a huge pain in the ass because we get 20 invoices a week that have to be turned into this spreadsheet, and then you're not actually unpacking the same number of boxes because you might get 8 boxes from Lunar and the last one is halfway full. And then 4 of your 15 boxes from Penguin are only half full. And then Diamond's coming on a whole different day. So I think just the amount of time and effort and energy it takes to keep the train on the tracks for a Wednesday, for a Wednesday new release cycle is like, it's challenging.
I mean, that's the thing I've heard from so many shops is that even when sales are up, you can grit through it because you're like, good, I'm doing well. I'm happy about that. But it's often the way more work for the same number of books and the same number of sales. And it's just like, that's where your ROI starts going upside down. That's where your efforts are not getting you the benefit that you expect to get out of that. And that I think is like really the hard part. But I did want to talk about the very big part of that, which is part of the broader direct market conversation. It's been a very deeply drunk year from the distribution side of things, with January having the Chapter 11 bankruptcy of Diamond Comic Distributors come out. We've talked about this a number of times privately, although that was mostly towards like the beginning of it. I am curious I'm going to do a very sports radio take on this. I'm curious as to how you do this. What is your read on the impact of the Diamond Comic Distributors bankruptcy, at least to date, and maybe even going forward? Overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
I mean, today I have to say it's overrated. I just don't think in today's market, it really matters that much. Everybody got out.
Yep.
Everybody's out and available somewhere else. Talking about publishers, all of the comics we need are available from much more stable distributors, with the exception of a few. I think at the time of our conversation right now, the biggest holdout is Dynamite, who you can talk about their level of impact on the business. If we can order Dynamite, we would be okay. We'd be just fine. Would we have disappointed customers? Sure. But I'll find them some other sexy lady comics, or somebody else will start printing Thundercats. We'll be okay. And maybe I'm speaking as a more modern shop who's been part of this fractured system for the entire time, and it makes up half of our lifespan of a shop, right? So I was there when Lunar started and when Marvel moved to PRH, and made the quick adjustments, and then as things were moving away from Diamond, was very happy to order them from other places. I have no loyalty to Diamond. I'm not a shop that ever leaned on Diamond to float me product or to put off bills or whatever, some of these things that people really appreciate that Diamond did for them. And I think maybe longer ago that was more impactful. I hear this often said that Diamond was like the bank of the comics industry. They were really helping people. Well, that was not my experience personally. They were just a place that I ordered from. I'm a super low maintenance customer. Just give me my stuff and I will order more, And in fact, my feelings about them are probably skewed to the negative because we would get, crazy damages from them and insane shipping costs, and so I don't have these like beautiful memories of the time where Diamond had it all. And, so it just doesn't feel to me like that big a deal. And in fact, if we got down from our 3 distributor system down to 2, that cuts down on some of that work that we were just talking about. Now, it does have an impact on I think its impact on other parts of the business beyond comics is probably more significant.
Like toys and games?
Toys and games and some tiny publishers. I got all of our Funko Pops from Diamond since Funko stopped distributing to individual stores. And I haven't ordered a Funko Pop this year. It's been 5 or 6 months since I've ordered one. I haven't ordered an action figure probably this year. So it's making me kind of figure out, what are we going to replace in this store? What are we going to replace action figures and pops with in this store? I got my first shipment of candy this week. Got some Grandpa Joe's candy. I got Avengers Pez dispensers and Dundee for awards from The Office, and we're going in different directions.
Have you felt a loss without that? Like without those, it doesn't seem like it. So I find that to be interesting because it's like, I don't know, it's this is a terrible reference, but it's like when in an office job, when somebody goes on vacation, you kind of want them to miss you because it means that like you're really good at your job. And it's like when you're missing those products from Diamond and nothing changes for the negative, that kind of says that you didn't really need those products to begin with.
That's it. I mean, that's exactly it. And then, and particularly somebody like me who doesn't live in the numbers, right? I was just looking at the categories this morning, wanted to prepare to talk to you. And I'm looking at action figure sales, for example, last year. It's like less than 1% of my business. What the hell do I care? And why do I have a wall committed to them?
Yeah.
I grew up and I liked action figures growing up and I was a collector. And I think they look nice on the wall. They add some kind of piece to the atmosphere of having the action figures. But it's like, as far as a product line, who cares?
Well, especially when space is an issue for you.
Exactly. I mean, there's a million different things I could put on that wall that probably would sell at a greater velocity and look just as nice. And frankly, we're going to get there. Or I'm going to, I still have boxes of action figures and things in my garage, and those will come out and fill that space. But I don't need to order new ones. We couldn't even be cost competitive with Target or the big box stores anyway.
Yeah.
We had to charge $29.99 for a $24.99 action figure because otherwise we're losing money on the deal.
Yeah. I think there's 2 really interesting things about the distributor side that contribute to what you're talking about with the whole. I agree with you. I think that it was a seismic moment hearing that Diamond was filing for Chapter 11, but I do think ultimately the idea of it was much scarier than the reality of it. And I think that's for 2 reasons. One, I think that a lot of people, and this ties into something you're saying, is that I think a lot of people in the industry were ruining the loss of a company that didn't exist anymore in a real sense. I think they missed what Diamond was rather than what Diamond is now. Or even was a year ago. I mean, the deterioration was rapid, and I think that that's a major thing. And with other distribution partners, most publishers and all retailers really had other options available to them. The other thing is I think that the idea that retailers wouldn't adjust when necessary proved to be false, but based on the conversations I've had with publishers, where it's even the stalwarts who wanted to hold out for Diamond, you can't hold out to the point where it breaks your business. And everything I've heard suggests that adjustments were made quickly. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to think about because there's so much conversation still, what's going to happen if Universal Distribution steps in, a Canadian distributor, if they try to enter the US market? What if this happens? What if that happens? I mean, there's a lot of what ifs in there, but right now it feels like everything's pretty stable in a way that I don't think a lot of people expected in January.
Yeah, absolutely. I think My expectation was when Diamond went away, or when Diamond could no longer offer products like Marvel, Dark Horse, but the things that they were essentially wholesaling from Penguin to distribute. When that stopped, I thought we were going to see stores close. I thought some of these 40 to 50-year-old stores were just like, nah, I can't learn a new distributor. I can't change my systems. I can't switch to a new POS system, whatever it is. And I would have said, okay, I get it. Like you were probably within 5 years of doing this anyway. This is probably a good point to jump off. But I haven't seen that at all. Not even one. I haven't seen it at all. And I've seen conversations with the retailers like, I'm doing my first Penguin FOC today. Is this what it's supposed to look like? And the initial shock of like, your first? Okay, cool, man. Yeah, let's get that question answered. But no, people are adjusting. It's part of this like comic shops as cockroaches type thing. Like we'll do what we have to do to survive. And some people are anxious to do it and want to get ahead of it. And some people are going to do it at the last second, but they're going to do it.
I do think part of that is because the stability that Diamond offered for so long, not in the sense that they were actually stable, but in the sense that they were a constant and they were just kind of like the only game in town for 25 years. And so it was like Diamond was always there and they always will be there. And I think at first people were like, wait a second, what in God's name do we do now? And I have to say, I think it's really encouraging how everyone responded. Like the way a lot of smaller publishers figured out other solutions, that's great. The way that everyone adjusted to the market, that's great. I think that a lot of the things people thought of the direct market and expected the direct market actually proved untrue when kind of faced with a very tough situation.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think like everything is fine. And in fact, we're probably better off. I think we're actually in a better place. And it sucks to say that because people lost their jobs, right? And especially in the world that we live in this country, where like losing your job is a really sensitive issue right now. And people that sucks. And good people lost their jobs, but I think those good people will get picked up and move on to bigger and better things. But like my life, and I think the life of a lot of other stores, is actually going to be made easier when Diamond is not part of the equation anymore. I saw a retailer post this morning for the first time ever. I think they're like a 7-year-old store, that they had nothing on FOC from Diamond this week. And listen, if I can have a shipment that I don't have to process when it shows up randomly on the middle of Wednesday, like sweet. That my life is now better.
Yeah.
If those 9 Vampirella copies could just be in my Penguin box, and those Mark Spears monsters could just be in my Lunar box, and then my life has improved by some amount, But I mean, like I do also have concern for small publishers. The one that I keep thinking about is I love Terry Moore. I love Strangers in Paradise and Rachel Rising and Echo and all these books. And there's nowhere to get his stuff. And Diamond doesn't have it. And what's going to happen there? Is somebody going to take on that? Or am I going to have to go direct to Terry somehow? Like there's some of these little publishers that haven't found a like Raft yet. And that I am concerned for. And I hope that they do.
Yeah. What is it? Abstract Studios?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting one because like he's been doing it for so long that he just he does it his own way. And it's worked because he's had that option with Diamond, because Diamond would carry very small volume publishers like himself, which is funny to think about it as like one person as a publisher, but it's true. It will be interesting to see how that works out, because that's one of the things I've discovered over the years is like, even if I don't read it, somebody loves every comic I've never heard of. And right. like you mentioned Mark Spears Monsters. I don't know where that guy came from, but that dude is outrageously popular. And more power to him. People love Mark Spears, but it was just like, I remember I kept hearing from people like, Mark Spears stuff sells a lot. I'm like, first off, who's Mark Spears? And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. This July, one of the greatest creator-owned comic series of all time begins a powerful new chapter. From Oni Press, return to the Eisner Award-nominated world of The Sixth Gun as creators Cullen Bunn and Brian Hurt reunite for The Sixth Gun, Battle for the Sixth #1, an extra-sized comic event told across 3 prestige format issues. In the aftermath of the Civil War, a race to claim 6 objects of enormous occult power began, thrusting the fate of humanity into the hands of an ordinary young woman and a hard-nosed gunfighter. Together, they were our best hope to stop Armageddon. They prevailed, but at a terrible price. 3 decades later, at the dawn of the 20th century, the Sixth Gun is about to be reborn anew, as it has been countless times across the centuries. The Sixth Gun, Battle for the Sixth #1, coming to comic shops everywhere on July 23rd. And now, back to the show. Actually, I just want to make a quick note. I only received one patron question. It wasn't even a patron question. It was from Terry Dodson, one of your Cape and Cowl Con guests, he just simply said, "I love Eitan." So, hey, you didn't get any grilling. You just got people talking about how much they love you. But
Thanks, Terry.
What do you think should be learned from the success of this moment, from the kind of success from the past year where it has been a bit of a positive shift for shops?
I think the lesson is that there's power in enthusiasm, and there's power in positive energy. And that's like such a hippie, wishy-washy type answer, but I think it's true. I think when the market is excited, and for some people it takes sales to be excited, and for some people it takes the story to be excited. But I think riding that enthusiasm, that excitement, those good vibes, and really making an effort to build on it is what we are experiencing right now and what we can move forward with. And I think what makes a lot of stores successful, even when times are more lean, right? There's always something to be excited about. There's always something to turn somebody on to. And you have to take advantage of those opportunities because 1, it's going to keep you positive and excited. And 2, you're going to make the sales.
Yeah. That ties back into the conversation we had earlier about the conversation that's happening in comic shops. Like, the greatest strength a comic shop has is that enthusiasm, because that's how, word of mouth spreads. That's how, frankly, like, if it weren't for the conversation, if it weren't for the engagement I have with the people who work at my shop, I could easily switch to any number of other ways to read comics. But I keep going to my comic shop because I love comics, but also because I love my comic shop. And like, that is, I think, absolutely essential. And like, I think that is one of the great strengths of like kind of the, I don't even know how to describe it, the newer wave of retailers is I think that they're really smart of tapping into it. That's not to say that, older retailers aren't necessarily, but it seems like that is something that a lot of newer retailers are really focused on emphasizing is like, how do we turn people's excitement for comics into excitement about being here?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting part of this business because, as you said, everything can be bought somewhere else for cheaper and more conveniently.
Yeah.
Especially when you think about like my shop, like right in the middle of downtown Oakland, there's no parking. It's a huge pain in the ass to get into our shop half the time. And we still see tons of people through the door. And I think comic fans who go to comic shops are also comic shop fans. And, we sell a ton of like Cape and Cowl t-shirts, and that's not because people love Batman so much, or love Brian K. Vaughan so much. It's because they like this place and this experience and the people in there and the way it makes them feel. And they like that this is how they get their comics. I think that it's part of the hobby is going and getting them. It's like I say this to people all the time, and I don't know where it came from originally, but like buying comics and reading comics are 2 separate hobbies. When people says like, "Oh, I'm so far behind," like, don't worry, you're crushing it on this hobby you have, which is stacking those comics. And you're a little behind on this other hobby that you have, which is reading those comics, but you're fine. You'll level out. And it means you're like really excelling at this one and you're doing just fine on this one. And I think that's part of why comic shops aren't going anywhere and why things are good. And I think just to tie it back to the diamond conversation real fast is like that is tried really hard to like bleed into our shop. Like customers come in and be like, "Oh gosh, Diamond, we just like, oh, who cares? Like, what? Doesn't matter. It's fine. The books will come late, or we'll get them from somewhere else, or like, don't worry. You do not have to worry about that. Like, we will, any books that we have to get from Diamond, we will get for you no matter what. Like, don't let that bleed into what we're doing here. Like, whatever. That's so not your concern. You're cool.
Yeah. I heard from some shops who said that they heard from customers of like concern about that. But I mean, that's the beauty of it, is there were and are other solutions to, that problem. I do want to note, in terms of the buying comics and reading comics being separate hobbies, I read on Reddit recently, there was a thread by a person who's like, how do I catch up? And they had 3,000 unread comics. And I was like, oh my God, I have like 10, Eitan. And I don't want to say it causes anxiety, but at the same time, I always feel behind. I also realize that I am like, I don't want to say I'm rare, but I am probably one of the people who is best at staying on top of his read pile relative to everyone else. I don't even know how. But to close, I want to bring up a big honor and another job you had. You were an Eisner judge this year, which I do want to say, you guys crushed it. Great list, even if it didn't have sketched on it. I'll let that one slide. But I think you guys did an absolutely fantastic job. It was thrilling to see how diverse the lists were. I mean, you had a Silver Sprocket book. Wait, no, was it Silver? No, it was Floating World was one of the best continuing series with Santos sisters, right?
Yes.
I gotta admit, I have to imagine that's Floating World's first best continuing series nomination. So good job by you. But I talked to you before privately about it, and you were telling me about the experience. I do want to talk about some 10,000 foot view things. It was a lot of work, but what was your favorite part of the experience?
I mean, yes, it was a lot of work. I absolutely loved it. For the first little bit afterwards of people asking, like, would you do it again? The answer was like, no, what are you talking about? And like, how dare you? But that's so not true, right? Like, I would do it every year. It was phenomenal. And I think what I've enjoyed most is it actually reignited my fire to read.
Yeah.
Like, not that I mean, I've always been somebody who's read a lot, but I would take the night off from reading comics and just stare at my phone or watch TV or whatever. And like, since whenever we started, December or January, whenever we started, like, that has not been the case. I read like an hour every night, and I love it. So it's really like, I'm reading so many different things than like I would normally, because I would oftentimes, like, I just got to stay on top of the new stuff so I know what's going on. And now I'm reading these wild drawn and quarterly books that, like, oh, cool cover, I'll probably never get around to reading that. Well, now I'm reading it, and it's awesome.
I think that's the thing that's interesting, is like, there's this perception, I've heard it from people before, even when I worked in a comic shop, that people believe that people in comic shops are just sitting around reading comics all the time. Like, that's their job. They just get a job so they can sit around and read. And like, most people in comic shops I talk to only really get a read when they're reading as part of their job to like know how much of this they should order or something like that. And reading because it's your job and reading for passion are two wildly different things. I was very curious if it reignited your passion a bit, and it seems like the answer is yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, big time. I constantly got like, my read to read pile is now my entire store. Like, I'm going to just read it all.
That's a good one.
I'm like, I'm always late to leave the store because I'm like walking the shelves trying to find, like, what am I going to read tonight? So yeah, that's been really exciting. And I maybe took one or two nights after, like, actually judging in San Diego and everything. I might have come home and be like, you know what? I don't have to read anything tonight. And then probably 2 days later, I was like, oh shit, I want to read some stuff. Like, reading time.
When I do my sketched awards at the end of the year, I always spend basically from like August until December just binging everything. It's a very minor, probably less honorific version of doing the Eisner judging, but I force it upon myself. And I often find afterwards, I do have like a little bit of burnout from reading so much, but it only lasts so long, because like, it's a really good reminder that the world of comics is really big and amazing. But tying into that, was there a read that, obviously we know that probably the Eisner Award nominations this year is probably an indicator of things that you probably enjoyed to some degree, but was there a read that surprised you in a very positive way from the experience, or one that just stood out?
Yeah, I think quite a few. I think you mentioned Santos sisters and Floating World, and I think a pleasant surprise was, so I don't know if this is pulling back the curtain too far. If this is where you're going to get those angry comments or things. The way that the Eisners work is the judges like split up different categories and screen them for each other, because there's so many books that get submitted in a category that one judge has to like pare down that list to make it a reasonable a number of books to read. And the categories I was responsible for screening were best continuing series, best limited series, and best new series. Which, like, what a fucking moron am I that I picked the categories that cover basically like every new comic book that came out in 2024.
Yeah.
Which was just the stupidest move a person can make. But I did it, and I think like Santo Sisters, which I had discovered on its own, when reading it with this judge's lens alongside all these other books, like the kind of recognition, like, oh no, this is just as good as these top tier books, like, so like it wasn't a discovery because I had been read it already, but the discovery of like, oh, this isn't just like cute and fun and different. This is award worthy, when putting it next to these other things. And then, I'm not somebody who reads a lot of like international comics. I just haven't leaned that way. And I read some incredible books. There's this one, Jellyfish.
Oh yeah, by Boom. So good.
Yeah, that was beautiful. And there was one, Juna, about, it was like a historical drama about this woman artist, and like, it's never a book. It's like got a brown spine and cover. It's like just does not jump off the shelf to me.
Right.
And so there were a lot of really fun discoveries. I don't read a lot of manga, and I fell in love with a few manga series. The Kagurabachi, which ended up on the list, is so fun, and the art is so cool. And then there was I have the worst memory on the planet. There's another one that ended up on the list for manga. That's like it's actually an older story, but it's the first time it's released in the US and translated, which makes it eligible. But it's like, I think it's by the guy who does Astro Boy, and it's about this like street fighter in the 50s or 60s or something. And it was just like, it was so good. And I was like, where have I been? Why am I not reading all this stuff?
I mean, that's the thing, though, is there's so many comics. There's no way one person can read all of them. It's just not realistic. And especially considering the fact that, with the Eisners, you're looking at digital comics, you're looking at manga, you're looking at translations, you're looking at single issue comics, you're looking at graphic novels. I mean, how many of those were released last year in combination? Like thousands. And like, this is just not possible. But so it expanded your horizons. It enhanced your passions. Has it made you order anything new for the shop because of the experience?
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I came home with a list. I used when they finally announced the finalists, then I could just like easily go to a website and be like, oh yeah, I need to get that one on the shelf and that one and that one and that one. Yeah, 100%. It was a great experience for that. Now then, it's a challenge. Like, how do you sell those books now? Because they are just sliding into a shelf. How do people know? Like, that's what having a staff recommendation section is really good for.
You got to make a shelf or a end cap that's just, I was an Eisner judge and these are my favorites list. Because, like, I mean, you got the subject matter expert thing up the wazoo right now. That's amazing.
That was my staff pick shelf for the last 6 months. It was just like, follow me on my journey through a billion comics. These are the ones I'm reading, or the ones that stood out this week.
That's amazing. Well, you already pretty much covered this, but to close, you're a retailer. And like I said, like the expectation is you're reading all the time. The expectation is that you know everything. Now you do know everything. You've read it all. Do you feel like more excited about the job because of the experience of being an Eisner judge?
Yeah, I mean, I think that being reinvigorated towards reading certainly like leads itself to being reinvigorated towards the job of the shop, because like I want other people to have these discoveries. I want people who love Absolute Batman to read,
Santo Sisters
or Baby Blue or whatever, like these things. Like, I want people to expand their horizons the way that I did. I want people to look at comics with that lens, like of, is this great? Did I just like this because it's fun? Or is this a comic actually great? Like, should somebody stand on a stage and hold a trophy and everybody clap because that comic was great? It's like, what a fun way to look at comics.
Yeah. I mean, both can be true, right? It can be great and it can be fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you had that experience, and I'm so glad that things are going well in Cape and Cowl Comics. But Eitan, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about your year in the shop, the weird world we're in the direct market, Eisner judging, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, man. Anytime.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with retailer Eitan Manhoff. You can find him at Oakland's Eisner Award-winning comic shop, Cape and Cowl Comics. As per usual, big thanks to Deanna Chapman for editing this week's episode. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my Eisner Award nominated subscription comic site Sketch at sketch.com for long form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketch on social media by following on Blue Sky and Instagram or following me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Omega Slice, Luis Felipe Alves, John Walsh, Brandon Paul, Aaron Bussey, AC, Simon Birch, Austin, Scion, Megan Marsden, T.S. Luther, Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast, Scott Carpenter, Gus, Menkei Freigeist, Saunter, Brian, Chris Robinson, David Byrne, Milton Lawson, Benjamin Wilkins, Chris Hacker, John Neesmith, John Auerbach, Dustin Weaver, Brandon Heyman, Aiden Hammond, Faith Aaron Hicks, Ben Rowe, Cameron Brown, Jonathan Breen, Charlie Stickney, Tom Drennan, Jeremy Thomas Burke, Jared Schwab, Scott Dunn, Chip Mosher, Seth Pomeroy, James McEwen, Andrew Lehman, Christina Merkler, Scott Place, Travis Gibb, Darcy Van Polgees, Tom Evans, Reed Beeman, Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian Near Levy, Jason Hussa, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Eurotam, Henry Johnston, Dennis Hoffman, Jingo Broren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Domstead, Rob V, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Oren, Klaus Vandeven, Subben Industries, Jack Mulqueen, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Canadian by Proxy, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon Pills, Patrick Brower, Declan Shelby, Dan Garino, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, Liana Kangas, Nick Bennett, Susanna Pola, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Robert Wilson IV, Andrew Carita, Stefan Holt, Philip Myra, Chris Pachala, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Walt's Comics and Books, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Gift, Sean Kirkham, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Akil, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, David Kelly, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Brawley, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Adam Heifel, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DeMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Wolfpack for letting me use their song Outro as the show's opening theme, and to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out both their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.